YouTube viewers, and welcome to another episode from Go Figure Customs YouTube page. If you're watching this video, you've probably seen the card that I made and you're wondering how to make it. Well, I haven't made it yet, so there's like this time paradox going on. You saw the card, it's done, but I haven't actually made it yet. So I'm going to make it for you to show you how I did it, or how I'm going to do it. Which is, I don't know, I'm going to have to watch Back to the Future again to see which tense that I need to use to the future perfect tense. I'm trying to learn Russian and I can't even figure English out at the moment. So, and that reminds me, I'd like to give a hearty privyet to the FSB, who, if they are not monitoring, listening in on my room, which they have bugged our rooms in the past, they are certainly watching this video on YouTube, probably wondering, what in the fuck is this guy doing? So, if we're confusing the commies, that's what we're all about, right? America. So, you've seen the card. It's not made yet, but we're gonna make it. And you're probably asking, okay, is this card going to be for a figure? First of all, yes. And let me talk about that for a minute. So, a buddy of mine, Marauder Ruben, who you know from Marauder Task Force, made a Don Moreno custom about a year or two back, and he did it using a kit from a place called Giga Bread Customs, and you can find them on Facebook, and I will post a link. I'll be sure and post a link to his page, and to I think he's using an Etsy store. I don't know. I'll post a link to his store. I'll post a link to his Facebook page. I bought the kit from him myself. It should be delivered to my house in Colorado today, so it'll be waiting for me in June. So by the time I'm ready to print this card off when I get home in June, I'll have started working on the figure. So I'll probably do, I already said I would do a video on printing and assembling cards, so we'll do the Star Wars card that I did last video, and then we'll do this Don Moreno custom as well to go with this card. So number one, this card is based off of art from a variant cover that was drawn by Jamie Tyndall, who's an artist for the Larry Hama G.I. Joe series. I had the issue number that he was, what issue that was. I think it was 256. I might be wrong on that. You can correct me if you'd like. I don't remember. I had it saved, wrote it down. I forgot it. It's probably with my power cord for my computer, which is currently in the office at work, and I'm not getting that till tomorrow. We're down to like 46% on the computer. So if the computer runs out of battery before I get this done today, I'll bring the cord home and I'll finish the video probably day after tomorrow, which is my day off. So, without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to open, I've already downloaded the photo, so I'm going to open that with downloaded the art that I'm going to use, Jamie Tyndall's art from from the internet. I'm going to open it with Photoshop. Alright, now, remember how I said that from the last video that everything needs to be 300 DPI or PPI, depending on which abbreviation you want to use. PPI stands for pixels per inch, DPI stands for dots per inch. They're interchangeable here. So we need to see what this is. We're going to go into Image at the top, click on it, Image size, and then we're going to look at resolution, and you can see it's 72. Also note the width on it is 16.1 inches and the height is 25.3 inches. So we're going to have to do some resizing on this once we get it to the right, once we start our card. So, but first I need to change the resolution. So I'm going to double click on 72, change it to 300, and hit OK. Now, this is going to change the resolution, but it's not going to change the size, even though it looks like that's what it's doing. Because watch what happens when I hit enter. Boom. Okay, now it's huge. Let's look at the image size again. It's still 16.1 by 25.3. We've just changed the resolution. It didn't actually change the size. Command 0 will bring it back to fit the screen. Command minus will give me the area around the card. And that's usually where I like to work, is I like the picture small enough that I can see the edges so I don't miss anything. Now I'm going to open a new file. And hopefully if you're doing this, you're doing what I did, and you've saved a preset, which is not very hard. And that's going to be a new file that's at 300 dpi, 6 by 9 inches in the portrait aspect. And all that template is just a blank white screen that's 6 inches wide by 9 inches tall with 300 dpi. I'm going to click V. I'm going to go into my image. Oh, but if you look here, the background is locked. I can't move that layer. So what I'm going to do is double click on it, duplicate layer, layer 1, enter. All right, now there's a white boxes and a white line around my picture. I can move this layer now. And I'm going to hit V again. I'm going to drag and I'm going to drop it on here, and you can see it is way too big. So I'm going to hit command minus sign until I can see again the edges all the way around. I'm going to click on one of those edges, and that will bring up the transformation tool up in the bar. I'm going to guess this is about 35% of the original is going to fit on that card. I'm going to need to shrink it to 35%. So I'm going to type in 35%. Now it's tiny. So I'm going to hit command plus sign to bring it back to a workable size. And I'm going to drag it by clicking and dragging. Yeah, see, I got some around the edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the edge of the picture. I'm going to drag it until it fits. I'm going to lose some at the top and I'm going to lose some at the bottom. So I'm going to drag it. And I want the cobra head at the top. So I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to lose some at the bottom, but I'm all right with that. I don't really mind that too much. Now I have to hit OK. I have the touch bar on my computer, so I can hit OK or enter twice to accept this layer. I'm going to go back to the hand tool so that nothing moves. And that didn't work. I can see white at the top. No, I think that's okay. All right, never mind. Sorry. All right, so there is what's going to be the background. So I'm having problems with stuff being in the wrong channel, 32-bit channel. I don't use channels in photography. I really couldn't tell you what that means. I need to be, it's set in a 32, but I need to be in a 16 or an 8-bit channel for the tools to work, for my Photoshop tools to work on this picture. So I'm going to go in there, I'm going to click, and I'm going to hit 16 bits. 16 bits per channel, like I said. Reducing the document can affect the appearance of the HDR. I'm not doing HDR. That's fine. Merge the layer. All right. So I've changed this to a 16-bit file. That's fine. Command hide, and I'm going to go into my templates. Like I said, I'm more than happy to share templates with you, or you can create your own. The trick is to saving the stuff that you use so that you have it next time. Simply by having my templates already ready, this is saving me countless hours every time I make a card. So I have a figure, what I call a figure bubble, and I'll explain what that is here in a second. I have the file's name's scale bubble, and you can see the extension on it is PSD. It's a Photoshop file. It means if I double click on it, no other application is going to try and open this. It's going to go straight into Photoshop. That's the only reason I have this set as saved in that extension, is because it will open straight into Photoshop. It's just a 2-second time saver. So this is what I call a figure bubble. This is where my figure is going to lay. All right. Now again, V will move the layer, allow me to move the layer. I'm going to drag it off and go over the tab of the card that we're working on, and I'm going to just drop it on there. Now you can see I just arbitrarily dropped it off. Now keep in mind, we are going to trim these corners. We're going to round these corners off. Now there's two ways that you can do this. There's a hard way and there's an easy way. The hard way is to actually do this in Photoshop. And honestly, it's not that difficult. It's just time consuming. The easy way is there's a little clippers that you can use to just clip the corners and round them off. It takes 10 seconds as opposed to, maybe 10 minutes in Photoshop. Yeah, it doesn't look as nice when you post the work in progress picture on Facebook to not have rounded corners, but I really am not out there to impress anybody, and I like saving time. Work smarter, not harder. So I will put a link to those particular clippers in the assembly video, which will be the 3rd video in the series. It's actually probably going to be like the 5th or the 6th now, actually. But at any rate, this is too low. So I'm going to drag it, click and drag. Now I need to position this. I'm going to lose art. Either if I put it here, I'm going to lose her leg and some of the bullet holes in the wall. What's behind it right now is her hand, part of the sword, and some more bullet holes. I kind of like it on that side though. I'm going to put it just right about there. I want some room at the bottom, some room and some room at the side. Okay, I like it right there. So I'm going to just leave that. Command H to hide, and now I'm going to bring up what I call the name bubble, which is where we're going to type the name. And it is correct name bubble. And it's also a PSD file. I just double click it, it opens in Photoshop. But now look, I got like 4 tabs open at the top. I don't need my scale bubble. I've already moved. I don't need this. I've already moved it to my picture. I can close this. Here's the image of the original art. I don't need this. I can close this out. And I'm not gonna, actually, no, I'm not gonna save the changes to this because it takes me 10 seconds to do it again. I know that sounds a little inconsistent, saving 2 seconds here but not saving 10 seconds there. Doesn't matter, because I probably won't be making this card again, so I don't really need to resize that file to keep it that new size. All right, last tool I used was the move tool, which is V, so it's already highlighted, ready to move. So I can drag it up to the top tab and I can just drop it on there. Now you can see since I dropped it here, it's clipped off the side. So I need to move it over. And the newer Photoshop will give you guidelines. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not. This is pretty helpful because it's centering. You can see the line right in the middle is the center of the name bubble, and it's going right in the center of the figure bubble, which is actually what I want. Now, height-wise, I need to keep in mind that I'm going to put a blister around this. The figure is going to be in packaging. And there's got to be room around the edge of this bubble to apply, to glue or tape that bubble to the card. And I'm thinking that there's not enough room at the bottom for some of the blisters that I use. So I need to fix that first. So I'm going to go to layer 1, which is my figure bubble. I'm going to click on it, and it will deselect the name bubble, and it will go back to the figure bubble. And I'm going to just drag it up a little bit. There, that's it. That's all. That's a little too high. And I'm eyeballing all of this. Now, there is a tool that you can use that kind of makes this a little handier. If you're not good at eyeballing stuff, you go up to View. At the top, go down to Show and Grid. I'm going to click on that real quick. And it puts a grid, overlays a grid on your picture. I'm hoping you can see that. It looks like, yeah, you can. And that makes it easier to line stuff up. I can line stuff up by eyeball most of the time, so I don't really need to do that. Although there's been times where on really complex cards that I've done where I've needed the grid tool, and it is very handy. But I'm going to turn it off for this particular card. So, View, Show, Grid, click it again, deselected. All right, now I've moved my figure bubble. My name bubble, I'm not sure if it's in the same place, if it needs to be moved since I repositioned the figure bubble. So I'm going to click on it, click on the layer, which is layer 2, and we're still using the move tool, which is V, and I'm going to move it up and down. And you want it up high enough, because remember, there's going to be packaging right in here. So it's got to be up high enough that it's not going to be that your blister is not going to overlay your name bubble. I've done that on a couple of cards. It's very frustrating when after you've printed this, after you've done the graphic art, you've taken it to the printer, you've gotten it printed out, you've assembled the card, which we're going to talk about in the beginning of the third video, and you're ready to put your figure on this card, and you notice that your packaging is going to overlay your name bubble. It's very frustrating. So just be sure that you leave enough space between where you put your figure and where you put your name. And I think that's enough space. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the color of these. That red's not too bad. I actually kind of like that kind of light maroon red, but that yellow's got to go. That yellow isn't going to work. Now I've got an idea that I want to try, and I'm going to use the gradient tool to do it. We're going to try and do it. I'm not the best with the tools. A lot of the stuff I do is hit or miss, and I can't replicate it sometimes. Not the way I want it to. But to get where I want to go, I need to change the color of these. And I want these to be white. So I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, which is the letter I. And I'm going to select white, because I want these white to start. Let's try one thing here. So I'm going to click and hold on this tool for a minute. So my last color selected was red, and my current color, the color I'm going to go to is white. The top color in your circle is the color that you're going to. The bottom color is the color that you're switching from. So let's pick, just for grins and giggles, let's go over the yellow. So it would be going from the white to the yellow. Let's go over the maroon red here. It would be going from the yellow to the red. I want white. So it would be going from the maroon to the white. All right, now I'm going to hit G, which will bring up my gradient tool, and that's where my paint bucket tool is. Keep in mind, some of these tools have more than one tool in the little tab, and this is one of them. Now I have the paint bucket tool selected. I need to be on the correct layer. So if I was on the background layer and didn't realize it and hit the gradient tool, it starts filling in, arbitrarily filling in stuff. So you got to make sure you're on the right layer. But now I've just dumped all this paint all over my card. Now what am I gonna do? Do I have to start over from scratch? No. This is one of the fantastic things about Photoshop. Photographers, we call this a non-destructive workflow. Even though I just made a huge mistake several times, I didn't actually destroy what I've done, because I can go up to image, edit, sorry, and undo paint bucket tool. That took out that top. Edit, undo paint bucket tool. Took out another one. Edit, undo. Edit, undo. Edit, undo. Edit, undo. I think there was one more. Edit, undo. And I'm back to where I was. Edit, undo will undo your last, I don't know how many. I think it'll go all the way back to the first thing you did. If you keep hitting edit, undo, it will keep undoing the last action that you did. So if you made a mistake, all you have to do, edit and go down to undo, and that will undo your mistake. I should have pointed that out on the first video, and I didn't. But I'm glad that I did on this one. So I don't want to drop the paint bucket on this layer. I want to drop it on layer 1 where the name bubble is. So I select that layer by clicking on it, boom, drop it. Layer 2, boom, drop it. And unfortunately, when we zoom in here down to the pixel, you can still see some yellow. So I kind of need to click on, get the arrow on and click anywhere that's yellow to fill in those spots. There we go. And you can see, when you really get down to the pixel, you can see, you know, like there's 4 pixels missing right here above my finger. It looks kind of, there's like probably 10 or 12 missing right here. When you really get down to the pixel, it looks pretty rough. When you hit Command 0 to zoom back out, you don't even notice it. All right, I'm going to go back to the hand tool. All right, now I'm losing the definition of the card, or the figure bubble, in the card art itself, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to use the gradient tool, but not the paint bucket tool. All right, I keep saying gradient tool is in the paint bucket tool, and it's not. So that's my mistake. Gradient tool is right here. I work backwards a little bit, which is not the end of the world. So what I've done is I've reopened my figure bubble. You can see the black and white checkerboard, which means there's nothing under that layer, and my figure bubble is white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the layer. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to go all the way to the top, and there's a thing called blending options. There's all kinds of cool stuff in here. Shadows, patterns, textures, all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with this. What I want to do is delete some of this stuff real quick here. Sorry. That's what I'm looking for. Or is it? Yeah, that's what I want. So what I'm going to use is the gradient tool in my blending, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a gradient overlay, so it's only going to overlay it on this layer, on the figure bubble. The style, I'm going to go linear, which is going to be top to bottom, but as you can see, it's left to right now, so I'm going to change the angle on that. And you can see the little wheel here. I'm going to change the wiggle 90 degrees. So let's do 90. Just type in 90. Which isn't quite what I want, because I want it bottom to top. So I'm going to do negative 90. And that will give me the gradient white starting at the top, moving into red. Now it's not quite where I want it, so I'm going to click on the color bar, and that's going to bring up a slider here, and I can change colors and how much, where the fade starts, just by moving these sliders around. The opacity stops and color stops. I want to bring the color stop up a little bit. And I think the color's a little too light for what I want. I want a darker color, so I'm gonna go with a darker red. Maybe a little too dark. And I'm doing this all kind of by eyeball. And then hit OK. And let's look at that a little bit. That might be too dark still. And change that a little lighter. That's hit or miss. Let's see how that looks. I'm going to say OK to that. And I'm going to OK this change here. And you can see the changes that we've made here in the little drop down under the specific layer. So let's go back into this. So I'm not using this. I'm not going to use this layer. So what I'm going to do is just command, oops, nope. Edit, undo fill layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit delete, and it will delete this layer. And I'm going to do the same thing with the name bubble, because we're going to, actually I'm not going to delete that yet. I want to try something here. So scale bubble, V, I'm going to move it over, move and drag it over, and drop it. Okay, yeah, I don't really like the colors on that. Colors still kind of aren't what I want. So I'm going to go and I'm going to click on that layer, and I'm going to double click on that layer, and I'm going to go back to blending options, and where my gradient is, I'm going to click on that gradient. I'm going to click on the color bar, and I'm going to double click on the, I'm going to click on the color bar again. Why is it not letting me pick colors now? Actually, it's got an eye tool. I'm going to pick a color from the card itself. All right, so I had to click. See, some of this I got to learn as I'm doing it. And honestly, the best way to learn is to just start clicking buttons and see what happens. If you screw up, you can always go back to the edit at the top, right? So I've got color. I should have, yeah, I have an eyedropper tool just by going over. So I'm going to go over and pick a color from the card in the background. And I should just be able to click on it, and it should change that color of the card. And I'm going to drag this kind of out of the way. I want to see how it looks on the card. So I'm going to just drag this down. I don't know if that's dark enough though. I'm going to pick a darker red. I'm going to pick this red right here. All right, yeah, I kind of like that. Is there a darker red yet? Let's try this one. It's kind of a darker red. All right, I'm just going to play with, I'm going to hit OK because I've picked my color. And I'm going to just play with the sliders. I'm going to move this, is that connected? That is kind of connected. So I'm going to drag it so I can see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to play with the sliders and find a spot that I like, because I want the white to come down a little bit more. So move the white slider down a little bit, and you can see it's dropped it down a little bit. Because that's kind of what I want. I want it dark at the bottom but I want it fading completely to white at the top. So I'm just going to drag this and see what happens. I don't know what that's doing. What is that? Let's mouse over it. It should say, it doesn't say. All right. No, actually, should. Oh, I think that's the opacity. How thick, how transparent it is. I'm not going to worry about that right now. So I'm going to move the sliders a little closer together because I'm working in a smaller area. So I want the fade to start maybe about halfway and finish about 2/3 of the way up. So I'm going to move it until I get the color fader where I like it. And then once I'm done, I'm going to hit OK. And then bring the layer style, and I'm going to hit OK. And now I've got a gradient on that. I should be able to do that again on this layer number 2. So I'm going to look at one thing real quick. I'm going to pull up my blending options again, because I've accidentally been duplicating some of my, you can see I've got more than one drop down shadow. I've accidentally been duplicating those. An older version of Photoshop, you didn't used to be able to duplicate these things, and that kind of screwed me up for a long time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on layer 2, which is my name bubble. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to bring up blending options, and I'm going to click on that gradient overlay. That should have saved what I was just doing just by checking the box, and it looks like it did. But how well did it do it? Actually pretty decent. So you can see it's just replicated it, the whites at the top as it is in the figure bubble, the reds at the bottom just as the figure bubble. But I've got an idea for that. I want to try something clever here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that gradient layer, and it's going to bring up the tool, and I'm going to change the angle. I'm going to change it to positive 90 degrees. And I'm going to hit OK. And now it's red at the top in the name bubble, and it's red at the bottom. So now the colors, the reds, are coming together to white in the center, which is an effect that I kind of like. I'm going to hit hand tool to deselect it. And I kind of like how that looks. I do this, I would say frequently on some of my cards, is to do a gradient fade, and I never remember how to do this. So this is a good tutorial for me as well as it is for you, because it takes me 10-15 minutes to remember how to do this each time. And I make my cards, I usually do the graphic art in a batch, so I'll do 2 or 3 at a time, save them, do 2 or 3 at a time, save them. When I've got 10 or 12, then I go to the printer and print them out. But we're not done yet. I'm going to go back to my layer 3, which is the new figure bubble. I'm going to double click it. I'm going to go back into blending options. And I'm going to hit bevel and emboss, and it's going to kind of give me, it's going to bevel the edge, and it's kind of giving me a drop shadow there. I'm also going to go down to drop shadow. I'm going to add a drop shadow, and I'm going to change the angle where that shadow is lying, and I'm going to drop it so it's kind of to the side of the card. Okay, so the shadow's going that way. I kind of want it to go down that way. So the arrow needs to be kind of pointing the opposite way of the way the shadow needs to go. And then you can just play with sliders and opacity, distance. So I want to increase the distance. I want to increase the distance of the shadow. So I'm going to move the distance slider. And you can see how that's changed here. So I'm gonna increase the distance. I'm gonna play with the spread for a minute too, because I think that thins it out. No, that didn't do anything. I'm not actually sure what the spread did. Size, I want to see what the size does. Okay, now the size is kind of softening the edge, and that's what I want it to do. So I want this, I want a bigger shadow, but I want it softer edge. And see, like I said, I'm just doing this by playing with it. I kind of know what I have in mind to begin with, but I don't know how to do it right while I'm doing it. So all you got to do is just play with it. Remember, you can always go back and fix stuff. And if you're not sure, you're already in YouTube, look it up. But I like this effect. That's what I want. I want that shadow that's kind of drifting off underneath it. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. I'm going to save that. I'm going to hit OK. Now, I want to do the same effect, and I want to do it on the name bubble too. So I'm going to go down, I'm going to click once on that layer, which is layer 2. I'm going to double click it and open up the blending options. I already have my gradient layer selected. Again, it should have saved my last settings from the last thing I did, which is nice. And that should be my drop shadow. So I should click on the drop shadow, and it should have the same settings. And it kind of doesn't. Unfortunately, you can see I've got like 15 drop shadows, so I'm going to unselect each one just to make sure that it's not saved somewhere else, that I did something stupid. And it may also this also may have saved. Actually, it did save. Well, no, it didn't. All right. It saved the angle. So I've got it at 47 degrees, but it didn't save the distance and it didn't save the size. So I'm just going to move those sliders, and I'm gonna eyeball this again. I don't remember what is that. I could just close out of this and write the numbers down, but I'm just gonna eyeball it. And I'm just going for an effect here, you know. It just play with it until you get it to do what either looks cool for you or what you want it to do. All right, I kind of like how the shadow is on that. The other thing that I did was the bevel and emboss. So I'm gonna just hit the bevel and emboss. And there we go. And now I have the same effect under the name bubble that I do the figure bubble. Now our card's really starting to kind of come together. But there's a few other things that I want to add to this to really make it, you know, obviously the art isn't mine. The figure that I'm going to use isn't mine. You know, we're using Jamie's art, we're using Gigabread's figure. But this is kind of my card. I'm using everybody's helping me out to make something new. So I want to make this mine. I'm going to hit Command -sign once just so I can see the whole card. And I kind of like am eyeballing it as I go just to make sure nothing is out of place. It looks good from a distance. There's a thing in photography, it's called a viewing distance. If you get too close to a photo that's been printed out, you start to see kind of a breakdown in the details, and it looks like it's kind of blurry and out of focus. But if you take a couple steps back to where to the proper viewing distance, it looks the way it should. It's sharp, it's in focus, and it looks really nice. So I kind of zoom it out, and I just kind of sit back a little bit for a minute, and I look at it, and I'm like, just take a look at it from a distance, from a good viewing distance. Yeah, I like that. I like the colors that I've used. I've used colors from the card, so I want some contrast. What I'm trying to do is get contrast here. Contrast is the difference between the two colors. So I'm using white and red are my primary colors on this. So I want contrast between the white and the red, and that's what I've done by using the gradient overlay. But now we're going to make, like I said, we're going to make this my figure, my card. So I'm going to hide Photoshop, Command H, and I'm going to put my logo on this. And I have a copy of this. I'm going to open this with Photoshop. All right, so this is kind of my G.I. Joe. I've used a G.I. Joe font. You can get this off of defont.com. I think I just did a search for G.I. Joe on defont.com, and that's what came up. And again, it's a template that I've saved. I've done some embossing, embeveling to the lettering previously. So this is a template. I already have done to it what I want to do. It should already even be 300 dpi. Let's double check that real quick though. Image size, yeah, it's already at 300 dpi. So I don't need to do anything to that. V to move the layer, and I'm going to drag that. Look how many tabs I've got up at the top. I got to fix that here. I'm going to drag this and I'm going to drop it on my card, and it's way too big. First, I'm going to close this out. I don't need this anymore. Scale bubble. I don't want to save this. I was practicing on this because I didn't remember how to use the tool, so I did it on an extra one. I don't want to save any of this, so I'm going to close it. Don't save. And I've already moved this over. I don't need to save it. All right, now this is clearly too big. So I'm going to click on the edge. It's going to bring up the right size tool at the top. I'm going to say probably 25%, let's say. No, way too small for what I want. Let's try 50%. I'm going to drag it a little bit. Probably not, it's still too big. Well, yeah, it's still too big. Let's try 35%. No, too small for what I want. 42%. 42 is the answer to everything, right? 42 is actually pretty close. Actually, 42 is, it's like, let me see. I think 42 is actually where I want it. How about that? And no, I think that's just a hair off. That's kind of disappointing. Let's do 40%. Yeah, 40% is perfect. All right. That's a shame. That would have been kind of ironic if I had used 42%. And if you don't know the significance of the number 42, I'm not going to explain that. You need to figure that out by yourself. All right, so I've resized that. So I need to hit enter, and it will ask me to okay the size change. I'm going to hit hand tool again so I don't screw anything up. All right, but now we have a problem. I like where my logo is. I don't like the black, and it's covering her head. So what am I going to do about that? Well, I'm going to get rid of that black first. And I'm going to do that by clicking on the erase tool. And I'm going to select Magic Eraser. And I'm going to click on the black and watch what happens. Boom. All that black is gone. Anything that's enclosed, that black's still going to be there. So if you look in the middle of the O, there's still... Here, let's enlarge that a little bit so we can see this. See what I'm talking about. So you can't see the background. So I'm going to click on that black in there, and it's gone. And here, it's gone. In the A, in my Hawkeye is still there. In the B, I'm going to need to really get into the pixels to get this. And see, it looks horrible this far zoomed out. I mean, you can see the edges are all gone. In the O, needs to go away. That should do it. You can see how rough around the edges it is. It didn't quite get that black there. But when you go Command 0 to regular view, you hardly notice it at all. But it's still over her head. So what I want is I want my logo over the Cobra sigil, but I don't want it over her head. So what we're going to do is we're going to select a different erase tool. We're going to select just the regular erase tool, and that will have the circular brush instead of that little magic erase icon. I'm going to enlarge it to get right into her head, and I'm going to change the opacity on the layer where my wording is. And we're in layer 4 already. I'm going to change the opacity to like 55%. 47. Arbitrary number, it doesn't have to be 55, it doesn't have to be 47. It just has to be enough that you can see both layers simultaneously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace around her head with the eraser in layer 4, which is my logo, and it's going to erase my logo. So, and I'm being very careful to just erase where her head is, and I really need to zoom in here for this. So I want to get right, and the brush is a little big, so bracket, left bracket to decrease the size a little bit. And I want to trace right along the edge of her head. Trace it right along the edge of her head. Oop, no, I got off on there. So what do? I hit Edit, Undo Erase tool. And it just brings it back to where it was a couple of seconds ago. So a nice trick with the eraser is erase, just click, 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 click. Because every time you click it, it's a step. If you click and hold and then drag, that is all one step. So if I'd erased all of this and then screwed up and had to go back, all that's going to be there. So I don't remember to do this too often, but this is a kind of a handy time saver. Is just click, click, and if you got to click and drag, just do a little bit at a time, so it's a new step every time. So if you screw up, you don't have to go back too far in your steps. Click, click. All right, how much of that's covered? Oh, there's part of it that we didn't get. So we're really gonna have to get in here to. This is kind of where it gets confusing because her sword's gonna cover that, so we're gonna decrease the size of the brush a little bit, and we're gonna erase where her sword is coming through, and we're getting right down to pixels. So I mean, if you go over just a little, it's not going to make that big of a deal. So that looks good. We missed kind of part of the edge of her head here, so I'm going to trim the edge off of that. I missed part of the edge. Yeah, I missed the edge of her head here. Head there. That looks pretty good. That looks like it's part of her head there, so I'm going to kind of clean that edge up. That looks like it's part of her sword handle, so I'm going to erase that. I'm going to erase that. That looks like it's part of the background, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to erase where her sword handle is. Alright, I think I've got it all erased where her head and her swords are. So I'm going to hit Command 0 to zoom it back out. And I'm going to change the opacity back to 100%. And then I'm going to kind of zoom back in and take a look at it. See, when you really zoom in, yeah, it's kind of rough around the edges. You know, anybody that's like a Photoshop guru is going to say, oh, that shit, that looks horrible. But you know what, for what I'm doing, when you zoom back out, it's really hard to tell. You know, we're not trying to fool anybody here, you know, with Photoshop. We're just trying to put a card together. All right, so now it kind of blends into my logo. So we're going to go back into the layer. We're going to select the layer, which is still level 4, layer 4, so we're still on that layer. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to go blending options again. And that bevel and emboss is going to do the same thing it's going to do here. It did here. And it kind of put a shadow in there as well, you can see. So now it's given definition that makes it look like it's behind her, but it's in front of the Cobra sigil. And I'm not going to do the gradient overlay that I did on this because I want the colors that I had, but I'm going to do a drop shadow. All right, I'm going to drop a shadow in there. It did kind of save the same, but it's a little darker than what I want, so I'm going to I just selected it by clicking the checkbox. So I'm going to click on that, and it'll bring up the tool. And I'm going to, let's see, what am I going to do? I'm going to decrease the opacity of it a little bit. I'm going to make it not so thick. I'm going to thin it out a little bit. There. I'm going to look back, get back a little bit. Yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of like where that's at. I like how the size and the spread and everything. I'm going to click on the stroke real quick here. Just real quick. I didn't really do anything. And it's taking too much off of it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a look at this. Size, maybe just a little bit. I don't know, I'm losing definition in my aim, and I'm not sure I want to do that. Yeah, I like it kind of how it is, right, like that. So I'm going to save, hit OK. That's going to save, and you can see all the changes that we've done to each layer, the effects. It's in an effect. So I'm going to do Command -sign to get around the edges. And there's our card. There's enough of my logo behind her, but in front of the Cobra sigil. That's where the shadows kind of come in handy because I've dropped the shadow from my logo, so it's casting a shadow onto the Cobra sigil. Well, at the same time, it's kind of casting a shadow on her. So depending on where the light source is coming from, it looks like it's the logo's behind her, and yet it's in front of the Cobra sigil, even though they're both part of the same image. That is one of my favorite techniques to do. All right, so there's one other thing I want to do to this, and I want to drop my logo in here. That kind of looks like my Comic-Con logo. So Command H will hide Photoshop. I'm going to go back to stock cards because that's where my logo is. My Go Figure Comic-Con on yellow. Photoshop file, double click it, it'll open Photoshop. V to move the layer. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to drop it. It's going to be way too big. Fuck, yeah, way too big. So I'm going to go to one of the edges, click it once. That'll bring in my transformation tool at the top. I'm going to say, maybe, let's try 20%. 20%, whoa, not even close. What I think I did 8 on the Star Wars card. So it's 8%. Yeah, 8% is still kind of big. So remember, I'm going to trim the edges, but so I don't want to drag my logo down where I'm going to clip my edge. I've done that once or twice, so that's a lesson to be learned. So I want it close to the edge, but not close enough to where it's going to get trimmed off. So one of the things that I could do here, if I wanted to, I could do the same trick up there and have the logo behind her leg, but on that wall, which I think would have an interesting effect, but I kind of like my logo to look like a sticker that is on the toys that you get from Comic-Con. So I'm going to leave it on top of her leg just for that effect, and I think that's still a little bigger than I wanted. I'm going to drop it another 1%. We're going to go 7% on that. Let's go 6%. Yeah, all right, 6% is a little bit better. I'm going to lose some definition on that, but from all I want to be able to read is go figure. Honestly, I don't really care about the rest. I just want to be able people to see my logo. I'm going to hit OK to accept those changes. And now I'm going to go into blending options again, because we're going to drop a shadow off of that too. I'm going to bevel and emboss it as well, which you can see has an effect that I've saved from last time. So I'm casting a shadow. I don't really want to cast that shadow so much. So I'm going to decrease the size a little bit. I'm going to decrease the size of that shadow a little bit. And then I'm going to add a drop shadow in there too. And I don't want it as far out as that one. I just want a little bit on the edge. And this is just personal preference. And there's our card. The only thing that's missing is for us to name the figure. So this is Don Moreno, but I'm going to call this the Storm Shadow variant. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to flatten everything. This just makes using the text tool a lot easier. I have everything where I want it. Now when I flatten this image, it's going to basically smush everything into one layer. And we do that by going to this little, I don't even know what you would call it, a paragraph looking thing, this little 3 bars here. I'm going to click it once, and I'm going to flatten the image. And I can undo that if I need to. If I'm like, ah, shit, I forgot to put in something, or something needs to be moved, or I didn't do a effect that I wanted on a layer, I can go up to edit, undo flatten image, and it will drop down those layers again. But I have everything how I want it. So now I have to think about the color of text that I want to use, because I've used a dark red and I've used a white, so I can't use white. Probably going to have to go with black on that. Do I want to use a fancy font, or do I just want to use, most of the time I use the Star Wars font that I used in on the last card in the last video, just because it's a nice clear font that most, if you're a collector, your eye kind of recognizes it without really recognizing the fact that it recognizes it. And stuff like that's very pleasing to your brain. You don't realize it at the time, but if you see something familiar on something unfamiliar, your brain likes that kind of stuff. It's like, ooh, that's new, but it's not. I don't know why, but I like it. That's why my logo, it looks like G.I. Joe, and that's why I have a G.I. Joe looking logo, and why my other logo is looks like Comic-Con. Because your brain has seen these before, and it likes those. But it's different. So it's like, ooh, it's new, but I like it. It's the little tricks that you learn in photography. All right, I'm going to hit Command plus just to look at this a little closer. All right, now I want to make sure I spell her name right, first of all. So I'm going to Command hide this. I'm going to go into Firefox. I just want to make sure I'm spelling her name right. Moreno. Moreno. Don Moreno. Okay. All right, let's go back into Photoshop. Now, for some reason, my text tool has text save. It's in Latin, of all things, so I have absolutely no idea what the fuck it says. I have no idea why it's in there. I can't figure out how to get rid of it. Like I said, I am not a guru in Photoshop. I am stumbling through this like a drunken monkey. So, text tool, and I'm going to draw a box. Let's enlarge just a little bit so it's easier to see. Oops, sorry, let me move my hand there. So I'm going to draw a box that goes over the figure bubble, or the name bubble, sorry. See, it's in Latin. I don't even know what the hell that is. So I got to hit Command A to select all, and then I got to hit delete to get rid of the text. Now you can see my cursor's over here at the left. I want it to center. So I go up to the top and I hit the center. I could the align tool. I can align it to the left, I can align it to the right, or I can align it to the center. I want to align it to the center. And I want to go to the color picker tool, and we're going to do black. All right. I'm going to use the SF Old Republic. I thought about using like a stencil to make it look kind of military-ish. I do that on some of my Navy SEAL cards, although most of my Navy SEALs I either have put in my custom box set, or I haven't carded them because I'm using them for diorama purposes on my flag. And I don't know, I haven't been able to figure out the font that Hasbro is using or has used on the Real American Hero cards for the text. I would really like to find that out. If anybody knows the name of the font or where to get the font that Hasbro uses for their cards, I would really appreciate that. So this is Don Moreno. I'm going to double check that just so I have that spelled right. Don Moreno. Photoshop. And oh, god damn it. See, once you go out of text, it will put a new text in there. So Command A, delete. I want layer, delete that layer that I just put in there. I want layer 1. I just want to see how it's creating a little box. I need to make sure my cursor is over the letters to get back into that box. There we go. I want to go to the end of it, and I want to hit return. I'm going to do parentheses, storm shadow. And I am a horrible speller. So variant. Let's make sure I spelled that right. Boy, my internet is shit today. And I did not spell that right. Copy. Go in Photoshop. Command V. Right. And I want that capital V there. And parentheses there. All right. I want to zoom out of that to see how that looks. I think that's how I want it. It's a little dark. I'm losing a little bit of the... I don't have a lot of contrast between the dark and the red there. I can hit blending options. I can do a little bit of finagling with that. I don't want to do too much where it's too obvious, but I can do a little bit with the... let's try bevel and emboss. No, it's too much. How about contour? No, because that's bevel and emboss. Stroke. Ooh, that's got to... See, I've done something to that tool and I don't want it. I want that black. Oof. Blend mode. Dissolve. No. Normal. Outside. Nope. And I'm just collecting buttons just to see what happens here, alright? Center. Size. Yeah, it's not really doing anything interesting that I want. What does that do? No. Not what I want it to do. Inner shadow? Nah. Inner glow? Nah. I don't want to do color overlay. I don't want to... A drop shadow might be okay. Not that one. No. See, now I've kind of reflected the name. I kind of like that, actually. The opacity's too high on it, though. I'm going to drop the opacity down to 13. I'm going to hit OK, because I can go back in and change this if I don't like it. I'm going to zoom out of that. I kind of like that. Kind of like the shadow hanging off of the words under the letters. I'm going to leave that there. See, this is... I knew what I wanted. I had an idea in mind, but I've kind of done this as I go. And that's one of the things that you can do as well, is you can design your cards as you go. Number one, it helps you learn Photoshop, and number two, it helps with your creativity, and number three, it helps your stuff stand out from everybody else's as well, which is, you know, kind of what we're doing, why we're doing this. We're trying to take your customs one step further. So kind of I'm gonna go Command -sign to zoom out. Do that twice. I'm going to take a look at it from a distance. Is that how I want it? You can see the kind of white edge up here. I think it's just kind of beveled. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. It shouldn't be there when I print it. If I do, I'm just going to trim it off. And we'll talk about that when we assemble the cards, because we're going to go to Kinko's for that. So I've got my card with the art. Thank you, Jamie Tyndall. Thank you, Gigabread, for providing the figure, which we'll see in the future. And then I've just used my templates that I've set up for my figure bubble, my name bubble, my logo, my two logos. And there's our card. That's it right there. I don't think there's anything else that I want to do to that. So once again, I need to flatten this image because I've added another layer. The text adds a layer. So I'm going to flatten the image. I want to switch to hand tools so it's not on text. I'm going to save that file as... I want to save it as a JPEG. So first off, I'm going to change the format, to JPEG. And I'm going to save that as Don Moreno Storm Shadow variant. So I'm just going to do the initials. That's Don Moreno Storm Shadow variant. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I'm going to save it as maximum file image, the largest file possible. I want as much information in this file as possible. Hit OK. And then let's do one other thing here real quick. I'm going to hit F twice to go into full screen. I'm going to enlarge that once. And there's your card. Start to finish, there's a G.I. Joe card. All right. I hope that was helpful. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope this all made sense. If it didn't, please get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to answer questions. I'm losing light in my room, so that's probably going to be the end of the video. Otherwise, this is going to get real grainy real fast. Please watch the video. Please like the video. Share the video would be great. Please comment on the video. Ask questions. Anything that you want to know. Help get this channel, get some tread under this channel so we can do more interesting stuff in the future. Thank you for watching, and I thank you for sharing. And stay tuned for future videos on making custom cards, because come June, we're going to take this to the final two steps of getting this printed and getting this assembled. So thank you for watching.